Morning, Durrick.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
May 9th today. Time has seemed to kind of fly by in a blur, at least from here. Um, yeah, this last week's been kind of a big week for you, right? Because you've sat down and got some more information regarding your progress so far. So yeah, fill us in a little bit.
Yeah, cool. Week 4 was completed Friday afternoon. Week 4 being the wrap up of that first round, in which we had discussions around what's the next steps forward and what's the best time frame for all that. So it was good to sit down and actually talk to them and have a one-on-one rather than just trying to guess what was going on, because I didn't really know when we met last week. In terms of findings this week, I got to see a bit more of my genetic makeup. They did some tests on me and started to investigate the genes within my body. And I don't think it's a full spectrum of genes in your body, but certainly key ones that indicate whether you're susceptible to certain things in your body. So that was really useful as well. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail a bit later. So this week started off just rudimentary with the normal IVs that I do on Mondays, hyperbaric treatment, and the OnDemed, which is the bioresonance type machine which measures the frequencies of the organs in your body. Did that. The Tuesday was around the chelation again, so removing the heavy metal toxins from my body using EDTA. And then the Wednesday was the Sota injection, which is injecting me with the urine therapy, to put it simplistically, which then stimulates an immune response to measure to see where your body's at. And then Thursday you have a consult and discuss the reactions and continue with the IV therapies. And then the Friday it's about just getting your short IV doses, all of those, the four or five bags that you have, and certain pushes with syringes to get them into your system. So yeah, pretty much standard for the rest of the weeks that I've had there. The key thing that was different was some of the reports that came back around the bloods. My bloods have been standard reports that come back every week, and it's showing an improvement in my blood levels. The key things I've had is that my HDL cholesterol has been low, so that's climbing up, which is good to get within a healthy range. And my hemoglobin, red blood count, has been low, and so that's been a sign of the bleeding, but that started to show an improvement as well. So 2 key indicators for me, which have been really good. Everything else looks like a standard normal human being. Of note is that the color of my blood, when they draw the blood out of my body to do the ozone therapy, it's more red. When I first got here, it was very dark, and now it's more a normal red type that you associate with the color of blood. So that's cool as well. The other report that I didn't realize what was coming my way was around your genetic makeup. And what they do is just measure certain areas of your genes to see how you respond and what sort of deficiencies you have. And I've got a few, no more than the normal, but they're in specific areas which are of interest. And what they do is they measure the 2 genes, and they show it with a 2 green dashes, mean that you've got them, those genes are both present. If you've got a red plus, it shows that one of your parents didn't pass that down to you. So I've got a couple of just 1 plus, a red plus, which means I didn't get that full gene from one of my parents. And some I've shown as 2 red pluses, which means I don't have that gene at all. This is me simplistically speaking with what my brain can comprehend. Excuse me. And then one was shown absent. So what they found was one of the genes that I've got expressed itself in a very limited function. So what that means is that my body is unable to release a lot of the heavy metal toxins that come into people's bodies. It's unable to process it well enough to get it out of the body. So hence I get a buildup of toxins in my body, which is one of the reasons possibly why when I did my urine samples for the metals, I have these high concentrations of metals in my body that have been excreted on a normal basis. They're there because my body can't get rid of them. So being aware of that, you can enhance the chelation therapy to remove those minerals in a way that's appropriate. So that was really good. So what that means is that going forward, I've got to limit my exposure to those types of metals or environments that have those types of metals in them. So even when I'm filling up my car with petrol in the future, don't stand over the bowser with breathing in the fumes, because that's where the toxins get into my body, and my body can't process them as well. So finding a new way to do that. So put the bowser in, walk away, and then come back when it's done. So just practical things like that. The other part was estrogen. It shows that my body is susceptible to estrogen, which is obviously a female compound that you predominantly want to have in your body. Being a guy, I want more testosterone than estrogen. But what it's saying is my body can't deal with that very well, so it can't get that out of the system as well either. And when I do get overdosed, it's going to affect my normal biological rhythms. So what that means is, how do you minimize that? No soy ever again. So no soy sauce on my Chinese food ever again, sort of thing. But also plastics in my environment, which have synthetic estrogen effects, BPA, that type of thing. I've got to be very careful around that. So more natural containers, so glass, whatever's appropriate, not using plastic. And what I've found interesting over here in America, even when you buy organic, a lot of the organic food is packaged in plastics. It's just one of those things. So that's how estrogen synthetics can get into our body and affect our body functioning. So that was really cool to know. So what was interesting was I talked through that with my parents in detail and said, these are the things that are coming up. And you can see that exhibiting in my father or my mother for the sake of the example. So they both expressed that toxins have been heavily in their environment as well, and they haven't been able to deal with it in a way that's been efficient because their body doesn't know what to do with it because our genetic makeup is not there. What is just a passing note, was that my ancestors on both sides of the family back when in the United Kingdom came from a line of tin miners and coal miners. So here we are, the family tree has this thing in our body, and I've got high tin levels. So cool to see, really, really cool. And what my initial thought with that was, well, how come no doctors said this to me before? So when I'm getting lined up for medical treatments, how come I'm not getting an expression of the genes that I have in my body to see whether these things are going to be appropriate? Now, whether that's because it's not part of the program that's recommended for people in my situation, or that because it's a public health funded system, that they don't have those treatments or assessments because it's just not part of the realm, or whether it's not deemed proper science by the medical fraternity to say it's going to help people by knowing this stuff. I don't know the reason for it, but what I do note is that I've got a clearer understanding of where my weaknesses and deficiencies are in my body with coming to the Centers for Advanced Medicine and going to a naturopath that I met back in Canada. These guys run full tests on your body to see where your weaknesses are and then treat you accordingly with that. Whereas when I go to the doctor, a medical doctor, what's your problem? I've got a grazed knee. Okay, well, here's a plaster. Or I've got multiple headaches. Well, here's some aspirin or something, and maybe you need to look at antidepressants. Completely different approach in my perspective for dealing with the health issues that I'm encountering. So that was quite enlightening to get an awareness around that. Of note is that it says when I get onto if I ever get onto blood thinners, that there are certain blood thinners that I cannot use because they're detrimental to my body. And that's what came out in this report. So once again, very useful to know. And that aspirin is not going to work for me. So not that I've taken aspirin, probably haven't taken aspirin in 15, 20 years. So it's not something I normally do, and I didn't do that because it never felt right. Go figure. So anyway, just nice to have a clarity around what my body's susceptible to so that I can work in a way that's good. Now, what it means overall for me to take from that, if anybody's coming at me with anything that's going to go into my body that's got heavy metals in it of any kind, I need to know exactly what that is and if I'm going to take that on board. And my current view is I'm spending a lot of money here to get these things out of my system. Why would I want to put them back in?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the week of treatment and findings. Yeah.
And where does this lead to? I mean, what's the next step for you?
So the next step is that I had a discussion with the doctors and just said what's recommended. Now, I'm in a unique situation because obviously what's going on around the world, and there's um, discussions around closing borders, not letting people in or out for a long period of time. And if I was to return home to New Zealand, the chances of me being able to come back to the clinic for some period of time are probably quite negligible. So going forward, what's the best approach? Now, to put it simply, I've had a really good response to this treatment. I'm feeling pretty good. The tiredness was there, and having my first day off has been good for me to recharge my batteries a bit. And the next week is about recharging my batteries. But they're saying because of the situation in the world and that I'm here, I'm best to make the most of the situation and take advantage of having the clinic here. So what they're recommending is taking the week off, and that's to allow the arse soda treatment to be prepared. During that week, I'll do the normal chelation, which is just continue with 1 day a week doing the metals removal, and then doing another cancer panel, which is tests all your bloods to test your cancer panel of bloods versus what you originally came in with. So that'll be quite a telling blood test coming this week. In terms of going forward, it's recommended anyway. They always said to me it'd be 1 to 2 rounds, but being stage 4, more likely you'll need 2 rounds. So they're saying for your own health and long-term survival ability, you're best to stay and do 2. Now, they don't make any recommendations in terms of this is what you must do. It's all driven by you as the patient. So I sat there and went, what is the right thing for me? It took me a day to figure this out because I want to get as healthy as I can. And I believe this stuff's working because it's showing in my body, my concentration, my mental clarity is really improving. So I sat with it and said, because it's a lot of money, like it's another $40,000 US. So money's already tight, and where I'm at the moment is just trying to make it happen. But, and as somebody said to me, just say yes and hope God pays for it. so it's kind of the approach I'm taking at the moment. But it's what feels right inside of me, is that I need to stay and do this. So I'm going to stay and do it. So that means another 4 weeks of doing what I've just done. Obviously, the dosages I'm doing can probably be upped because my body's more receptive to these things, able to deal with it. So there might be a faster impact in that. So that's the plan. And I can stay here in the United States because my visa allows me to till near the late June, which will allow me the timing to get all these treatments done and be all tickety-boo before I make that flight back home to New Zealand and start dealing with it down there.
Oh, wow. So how do you feel? How do you feel about that? About another 4 weeks of treatment?
Quite good, actually, because I know the benefits that are coming from this. I want to give my body the greatest chance to do all I can to help it to heal. And I believe it is. I have intentions of going home fully fixed, and I feel like I'm pretty close. And so to stay around and do it is important for me. Obviously, the financial consideration is there in my mind. It's going to be a very, very tight squeeze to be able to make this happen. But why not? It's my life I'm playing with, and if I don't do whatever I can, then there's no point. So just going for it. The hyperbaric chamber, I must admit, after the 6th week in a row of doing 5 a week, where you're sitting in a hyperbaric chamber for an hour, it got a bit tiring. So it's nice to be able to be out of that thing this week to give myself a break. And I know the tiredness that comes from it, but I'm willing to deal with that because I've talked to people who've had chemo and radiation, and you can see the effects on their body. And a simple demonstration is often people with chemo lose hair. Well, I'm growing fingernails and I'm growing hair, and I dare want to say, no science behind this, even the grey bits are starting to get a bit blonder. So I'm just going, wow, that's a better approach for me. I like that. So it definitely feels like the right way to go. So I'm going to go for it.
You certainly look so much healthier. since we started these. Like just the color in your face, even the I don't know the right term, but almost like the thickening. Like there was a bit of a hollowness with your cheeks before, and it's just you're just a lot more full and vibrant. So it's been interesting for me to be able to watch and notice little physical changes. So so in the next week, what will your sort of day-to-day routine be like, given that you have this week off?
So keeping up the supplementation. So they've given me a regime just to continue. There's been some slight alterations just based on the results that came back from the tests. But what my goal is just to rest. I got quite tired. And when I say rest, what I have had happen is that over the course of the treatment, I meditate when I go into the hyperbaric chamber, but my mind's been getting more and more distracted. Obviously, as I'm here, I try to keep up with the COVID-19 situation to see what's going on worldwide and see if it impacts me, and just try and broaden my mind about the information that I know about this situation. And so obviously once you start digging into that, you can get quite involved in that, and I have fallen into that. So that helps contribute to the tiredness. So my meditation has suffered a little bit. Now, I know that this week has been good. I've already got up. First thing I did this morning was did some yoga and meditated. And boy, do I feel so much better. The last few weeks I've meditated in the hyperbaric chamber just aren't quite the same. You got a plastic case around your head like an astronaut's helmet, and every time you breathe, it goes, and you sound like Darth Vader, and you got this machine pumping oxygen, and you go, so not the most conducive to a proper meditation, and so that is my goal this week is yoga every day and meditation, getting back into that creation of what I want in the future. Just on that though, so in the past I would have judged myself. I haven't done this, I haven't done that, I'm not being the best that I can be in relation to this, so I'm a bad person, I've got to change this. There was a recognition that it's not perfect going through this treatment because it's full on. Like, you go and do your treatments, you leave the clinic at 3 or 4 o'clock, you come home, you have some food, have a bit of a break, and then you got to get into your evening routine, which is your castor oil packs, preparing your food and having your coffee enemas. It's a full-on job. So, you know, I'll get home and I'll start at 4:30, 5 o'clock for the afternoon shift, and I don't finish till 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Wow.
So it's full on, and then I want to catch up sometimes with family or some friends online just to have a quick conversation, and it takes it out of you. So it's full on. So that space to be able to do the meditation and the yoga is what I'm really enjoying, and not to have to rush to the clinic every day and do this stuff. So my goal is just to rest, get out and about. The restrictions are starting to come off in North Carolina, like it seems like around the rest of the world as well. So looking at hiring a car and going for a drive, and not interacting with a lot of people at all, but going for a drive into the mountains just to see some different landscape, because
Sure.
all we've seen since we've been here is these 2 blocks that we hang out in, really. So it's a bit of a change.
Speaking of other people, over the last 4 weeks, have you formed any relationships with people that are in the neighborhood or are in treatment? I mean, have you got to know people?
I know people in the clinic. I think I'm starting to get to know them quite well. But in terms of neighbours around the area where we live, no, everybody's keeping them very much to themselves. There's a couple of people, me and my brother go out for walks every day, and there's a couple of people in certain houses that we wave out to and say hi. So there's kind of a camaraderie there, but no, it seems people are very much staying to themselves and not interacting. In the clinic, obviously you're working with nurses and doctors, so they're coming around and talking to you, so there's interaction. And it's nice to know a bit more about their personal life and how they got into this type of work.
Sure. I mean, that must be quite fascinating, actually. I mean, what's that experience been like for you to get to know either the people working at the clinic or other patients and hearing their stories? What's that experience been like?
Yeah, cool. I want to start off with the doctors. The doctors, I get to my doctor, Dr. Sarah Barber. She's very efficient, very direct, and I really appreciate that. She has taking me through the emotional work that I've done, and she set up my plans and all that sort of stuff. So very helpful. Just understanding her background has been really cool, because this, speaking from the outside, this path that these doctors have chosen is not your conventional path for doctors. Generally, in my experience, when you talk to doctors, if you start talking about emotions, it's about, well, are they unstable or are they stable? If they're unstable, then we need to medicate or do something around that in terms of going and seeing a professional. Whereas these guys are saying, well, what is your emotional state? Where does that come from? How have you brought that into your environment? Are you generally pessimistic or are you quite optimistic? What are you doing in your own life that's contributing to your situation? That's really cool. And then just seeing their perspectives on the doctors I've met really resonate with the way, what I understand the world to be like, and I've found that very enjoyable to work through and discuss. In terms of some of the other patients, just meeting them and talking to them about how they got to find out about this clinic, the Centers for Advanced Medicine, has been enthralling, because it's a journey for everybody to find out about it. It's not your first port of call, because generally you don't even know they exist. You're stuck in your system that's conventional, that's there in front of you, because you see the ads on TV for pharmaceuticals, the big hospital down the road, and you've got your local family doctor. So that's the process everybody sticks to. But with my own journey, I found Dr. Batar when I first started searching, and I wrote it off because I went, well, I'll never be able to afford that. And then hearing from other people that other patients who have had family members went to the same clinic and had one of the most rarest forms of cancer and was able to be healed and still alive 30 years later. That's pretty impressive, because the whole journey that you have with that is impressive. And then for that person, this person that I was talking to, for that family member to know that story about their family member, but when they face their own cancer journey, not being aware that the Centre for Advanced Medicine is even an option. So they didn't even look at it until they went and they had a conversation with this family member and, why didn't I even think of that? And so that person then started exploring the route. And the people I've talked to, patients, so you make a decision to come to these guys. It's not a just, well, this is your next cab off the rank. This is a conscious decision to come and see these guys. Said it was the best decision they made, because the philosophies are consistent with who they are and the benefits they've seen in their own treatment. And the trusting in a higher force, the trusting in their own inner guidance. Most of the patients I've talked to have just expressed that when they're having a doctor's conversation with a conventional allopathic doctor, it's all around, well, there's a lump there, it's got to come out, and we've got to do chemo and radiation, and this is how many rounds you've got to do. There's no discussion of options. And, if somebody's got a tumor, so big, and they're talking about chemo and radiation, you kind of go, is that throwing a bomb into kill an ant? Is it overreaction or not? What are we throwing into our body to try and counter something that's so small? Surely there's got to be a different way. And there is, but it's not well known and it's not widely accepted mentally by a lot of people. So those are the sort of discussions I've been having with people, and just meeting really good, genuine people going through their own life challenges and figuring out the best way they can. But it's been enlightening to meet these people and have discussions.
Do you foresee that this experience will, obviously it's having a profound effect on your life right now. Do you see it having what kind of an effect do you foresee this will have on your future, a year from now? Can you, have you even allowed yourself to kind of yet, say or ask yourself what would it be like to look back at this situation in a year? And
yeah, I haven't really. I haven't. I think I might have mentioned in a previous video, when I'm doing the EVOX therapy, the perception reframing, I looked into my future and I can feel something really cool and exciting there, but I don't get to see it. Yeah. And I've done a lot of intentional work around what I'd like my future to look like in the past. So, I have some pretty clear views on what I want that to look like. And I believe that ingrains into your cellular form. I believe it ingrains into the quantum field, the creative force, whatever term you want to put to it, I believe those intentions get put out there. So, so when I try to examine it while I'm going through the treatment, I don't really get clear pictures of what that could feel like or be like, and that's what this next week is about, is with the meditations, re-establishing that.
Nice.
But I have a desire to share what I've experienced and what I've learned now, and I don't know. People probably do. Maybe I'll try and rephrase all that. There's a lot of thoughts jumbling through my head just then. So I came to this situation, a pretty dire situation. So stage 4 palliative diagnosis. Discussions with oncologists say, you know, if I do nothing, maybe 12 months. If I do something, chemo and possibly radiation, but more chemo than anything because it's a full body issue, I've got maybe a couple of years in me, and I'll be doing treatment for a lot of that. And the percentage rate, the research that I did, was a 5-year survival rate's 4%. So I looked at that and went, well, none of that makes logical sense as to spending the rest of your life feeling pretty sick. Because the people I've talked to, now when I talk to doctors, they'll say, well, no, people have a mostly fulfilling life with chemo and radiation, and they're able to do most of their life in their jobs and whatever they're doing. But the people I've talked to have painted a very different picture. Now, everybody's different, and it could just be that my population, sample population of people I've talked to is not representative. But the people I've talked to have expressed that's a difficult road, chemo, very difficult. So I look at this decision to come over here and go, I get to walk uninhibited. I get to do, I've had a trip overseas and lived in a different country for a few months without, you know, in a pretty big, serious global situation. I wouldn't have got to do that if I'd have gone the other path. I also, if I'd have taken the surgical route, it would have taken me 12 months to 2 years to get through all that.
Yeah.
And that's a long time to be getting yourself cut open and fixed, if that's the right term. And I haven't. Sorry. So I haven't had to do that either. I do believe there's a different way of living. I do believe there's a different way of medicine being given to the human race. The IV therapy is questioned a lot in scientific fields, and I've seen benefits in my own life. So I don't, sure, the science might not be as complete as a pharmaceutical drug or anything like that, but there's a lot of money is required to do full-on investigations. I guess one of the things I've noted with the clinic here is that when you do a treatment, you have to make a conscious decision and sign a form saying, I consent to this treatment. Now, when you're in the medical system that I was in New Zealand, I probably only signed 1 or 2 forms regarding surgery and possible oncology. There's no clear distinction that you're making a conscious choice. You're just signing it because it's your only option.
Yeah.
I guess part of my future feels like just sharing what I know. I don't know how that's going to happen, what it's going to look like, but I've seen people who have been diagnosed with cancer going through a lot of pain and trauma and not knowing there are other options out there. And to me, that's the biggest crime here, is that they don't know there's options of seeking different treatment alternatives. As to why that is, to me, there's a political matter behind all that with various health organizations around the world. And there's a doctrine that's believed that this is the only way that you can fix human beings. I remember at an event that I was attending when I first got diagnosed, and it was all about recovering from cancer. It just blurted out of my mouth that I don't believe that human beings are designed to be cut open and dumped full of poison. That's just a fundamental belief that I have inside of me. So why would I agree to do that when I get to a point in my life where it's my health at a challenge point? It doesn't make sense. And so anyway, so it's long. Anyway, I guess just to say that part of the reason I'm doing these videos is that I don't know what's going to happen with all this treatment, but I've really enjoyed what's happened. I've enjoyed the clinic because the people are amazing. I've enjoyed the awakening to a new way of doing things, because the other way I was doing it before I got to this clinic was very much the natural way, in terms of using natural herbs-based plant type approach and meditation. And while I think I made a lot of progress emotionally, the physical element wasn't coming with it. Whereas I come to this clinic and the physical elements decided, yep, it's time to move and shift. So I hope to be able to, in some way, share with people that there are options, and be an advocate for people having choice around their path. Because when you're sitting with a cancer diagnosis, the first thing in your head is death. Am I going to die? And it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't. It was in my head, don't get me wrong. When I got told, I'm raw. What does this mean? But it doesn't have to mean that. I've met people, and some of the numbers of people who have been through a really arduous cancer journey survive when they take responsibility for their own health and they make a conscious decision to change their lifestyle and their emotions. Their life improves. Now, that's an option. It might not be able to be framed in a medical perspective with double-blind trials and all that sort of stuff, but it's a very real phenomenon. And there's a number of people worldwide promoting the ability for an integrative approach to recovering from cancer.
Have you, obviously there's an accumulation of intellectual knowledge, learning facts and learning how to change the way you eat, learning how to change the way that you do things. But I'm curious, to what extent um, does it cease to become solely about intellectual knowledge, and when do you start doing things by uh, either instinct or intuition, or because when you, so for instance, when you eat a certain way, do you feel a physical difference if you're eating something versus another thing? How much does that kind of play into your journey as well?
Yeah, cool. Your intuition question's a really broad area, and I quite like it because there's a lot of avenues to go into there. In terms of food, it took a long time for me to become aware of what the food was doing inside my body. And an example of that in my specific situation now is that part of the treatments I've had to up my protein. And so, because before that I was predominantly eating a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet, probably more vegetarian than vegan. And while that helped to clear the toxins out of my body and make some significant shifts, it's not a long-term diet for me. So dairy products was also another thing that I wasn't eating much of. So what protein and dairy products. When I came here, one of the things I got put onto was a whey isolene protein. That was a good mix-up of words. A whey protein isolate. So I haven't had that sort of thing for a long time. So my body, when I first started putting that in, I just went, oh, this is hard work for me to process this.
Sure.
But then I started to having to eat meat. My body started to call out and say, I need protein. And how did that call out? I would see a hamburger patty sitting right in front of me and I'd go, I need that. And I had one. And that was all I needed of that, because my body just immediately, the need for that dissipated. So also with the treatments, when I started eating more protein, I started to feel better through the day. When I didn't eat proper food, I didn't know this at the start, but the nurses kept on saying, you've got to have protein, you've got to eat full meals, because I found it very hard to get everything in with the supplements I'm taking, as well as the whey supplement. I just found it very hard. I was very full, but they said you need these full meals. And they said, you've got to be eating protein. When I started to eat the protein, my body started to feel a bit more stable. The treatments weren't as hard on me physically as they were before. So the key thing I've had with that is the only way to get meat at the moment over here, unless you want to pay a fortune, is through sausages. So I've been buying organic chicken sausages with no preservatives or additives or anything like that. And I had a few and they were good, but then my body started, I had one yesterday because I didn't feel like a big meal. I just had one sausage cold and my body went, nah. So I just got a stomach ache. And I went, okay, my days of eating sausages are over. So I've got to find another source of getting those proteins. So that's an awareness of your body. And that comes from changing your dietary habits into an area that feels right, or is a program that somebody recommends. The intuitive side of it, the key thing that a lot of people don't discuss, so there's programs out there for Africa. You can go and buy programs and all these different food eating plans. You've got to find one that's right for you. And to me, that's where the intuition kicked in. Now, when I made the decision not to go down the conventional route of cancer treatments, that was an intuitive decision alone. Because I'm sitting there going, the doctors are saying this is a solution or an avenue for solving this. And I'm telling them I'm not interested in that. I'm going to go this different way. That was purely an intuitive decision based on a discussion I had in my own body and head that came to me that just said, if you go through the conventional treatment route, you're not going to learn what you need to be able to survive. Because it's a quick fix, it's a band-aid. That approach ignores everything about my body in terms of my lifestyle, my emotions, and my environment. It ignores all that because you just get fixed.
And it would have created a whole new scenario of issues that you would have had to deal with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You know, and it's such a trip when I think of, you know, chatting with you in December of 2018, you know, when you were needing to make some important decisions. And so hearing you talk about this, I kind of go back there to those conversations and what I can only imagine was going through your mind at the time. So to see, you know, a year and a half later, you know, where you are right now. Okay, so, you know, I was also wondering, have you found a correlation between your food, the food that you consume, and your emotions?
Yes. Yes and no. I can't answer that specifically. And the only reason I say that is it's something I hadn't thought about really. But what I do know is that so the old diet that I used to have had a lot of potatoes, a lot of bread, a lot of processed meats. I'd always feel hungry afterwards, and I'd always feel unsatisfied with the meal.
Mm.
And with that, then would come, well, I need to keep eating to feel that fullness, that emotional satiation or happiness. Now that I eat predominantly, you know, vegetables and clean protein, my emotional state doesn't fluctuate as much as it used to. I'm pretty constant. Now I've had emotional ups and downs as I go through this treatment, and before that I've already discussed rage in previous discussions we've had. But when I eat better, I don't seem to have those ups and downs. I'm able to stay more level. If I eat if I eat something that's not right, so like some fast food or something, and I have done that a couple of times over the last year, I feel foggy and almost distant from my own body. And then I suffer the consequences because my body's just lethargic and tired, and I'm going, oh, and so my brain cloudiness comes in. So emotionally, I'm not so sure I can answer that question, but physiologically, definitely a noticeable shift. And I guess another way possibly of looking at emotions is just clarity of thought.
Sure.
I don't have that cloudiness like I used to, and being able to hear my own thoughts as well is a useful thing. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's probably the best answer I've got at the moment.
Fair enough. So another, I mean, I'm interested to know if you've experienced any difference in the quality of your sleep, specifically with regards to dreams, since you've started treatment. Has that changed at all?
Quality of sleep has been challenged because I have to wake up every 4 hours and take supplements.
Oh,
So you know, I want to head off to bed about 9:30 10 o'clock at night, and then I got to wake up at 11 to take a tablet, and then I got to wake up again at 3 a.m. in the morning to take another tablet, and then I got to be awake at 7 in the morning to take another tablet. So my sleep patterns have been off. But anyway, during this week that's coming, I don't have to take those supplements through the night. I'll take them during the day. So my sleep patterns have been off. In terms of dreams, I haven't dreamed. I have only had 3 dreams, and these are of interest. And I've raised these with the doctor. And they're all around the same thing. And one of those things was there's an ointment that I keep seeing. I'll have a dream that there's an ointment in a bottle that I should be using, and this is going to help me heal. And then I get emotional because I can't find it. I haven't been taking it. This is during a dream. And that dream will be enough to wake me up, and I'll get up and I'll physically start trying to find out, where is this tube that I'm meant to be using, the supplement. And so then I'll get up in the morning when I finally get out of bed, because I'll rationalize, well, this is just silly. When I get out of bed, I'll then get my supplement list out and I'll go through, am I taking that? Am I taking that? I'm taking that. I'm taking all my supplements. I'm not being irrational here. What is that? And I spoke to the doctor about it, and they just said, well, and they just said that it's probably just a fear that you making sure you're doing everything you can in terms of taking the supplements to help your body heal.
Mm.
And so that's the only dream I've had around that stuff. But it was that was for 3 weeks. I had that one dream. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. I had each week I had that dream one night.
Wow.
So I haven't had it since, and it's probably more of a fear that is there something else I need to be doing, and that's possibly more of a reflection of my makeup. I'm very much about doing the most that I can to make sure this works, because I want it to work. If there's something I'm not doing and it's key, what is it? But yeah.
So as you look at going into the second round of treatment, what is going to differentiate the second round from the first?
I don't have to go through. I don't have to buy all the equipment to get set up and do it. I've already got a lot of the stuff I need, and the supplements are there. It's a mirror of the first one. There's no real difference. I will just be further down the track. The body should be cleaner that I start this time. More metals gone. The cancer panel should still continue the showing of the improvement, and the issues we identified in the first round, we'll have more data to see what they're doing in the second round. So not too much different, really. It's more just a continuation of what we've already done. Yeah.
Will you continue to see the same kind of like release? You know, like when you're doing the foot baths and you see the toxins coming out. I mean, is that going to diminish because your body's...
Good question. It already has started to diminish and change. So yeah, I would expect to see, hopefully, with more foot baths, see that diminishing the quantity of the toxins that are coming out, and starting to see a clearer bath and possibly some different colors, more around the lymphatic system, which would be exciting. And I've already had some proof to show that's the case. In terms of the minerals and metals, I'll probably have to do another urine test to see where we're at with that. But I suspect there'll be a change in that because of the chelation that I've been doing. And the level of IVs, the values that are going into my body will increase as well. So my intent, Mark, is that when I rock out of here in the end of June, I'm better than 100%. That's the goal, and that I have visions in my head of climbing mountains and just using this body that I've always had and the energy that I've always mentally had but never physically had to go and live the life that I wanted. And I look at my life reflecting back and say, man, there were so many times I wanted to go and do stuff, but I was so lethargic. Part of that was from the head injuries. A lot of that was from the food that I was putting into my body and the toxicity I was carrying inside of it. And that's what I've learned, is that the toxicity is a huge component of your health and largely ignored in this world. And I know it's been ignored because even in this COVID-19 situation, the toxicity of our environment is being ignored while the disease is being enhanced and focused on. So what's happening inside of me in terms of my uninformed awareness of what toxicity does to my body, we're living a life of that out there in the mainstream, is that we aren't aware of the toxicity in our lives that's causing us problems. And I'll refer to Dr. Buttar on this. He had a quote. He said, people are worried about guns killing people. Now, people use guns to kill people. And I'm not trying to get into the gun debate, but they kill less people than we think, because what's killing more people is the food we're eating. So he's saying, why not ban the spoon? Because that's what's contributing to a lot of our ill health. And if we look at the people that are dying from COVID-19, and this is based on mainstream media, it's the people with pre-existing conditions that have got the concerns, chronic conditions. Now, the chronic condition I'm faced, I put it there through the food choices I made, the emotional state that I was in, and the toxicity that was in my body. It's mine, nobody else's. So what do I have to do? I have to clean those up and be responsible for that in my own environment. And this is why I have great hope for this world. When we recognize our role in our own health, and we start seeking out things that bring health into our own body, the world around us changes. So an example, I no longer look for food that's easy and convenient. And you discussed this last week, I think it was, about the convenience in our lifestyle. So it's very easy, and some days I wish it was easy enough just to go and get a microwave meal, rip it off, stick it in the microwave and cook it 5 minutes later, I'm eating. But that doesn't bring me health.
Yeah.
And there's so many additives in these types of meals. So when I start to choose food that's actually food, not processed and packaged, I'm making a conscious decision to support somebody who produces that fresh food. If I'm buying fresh food, it's generally going to have to come from a local producer. All of a sudden, all the shipping and all the flights that take to get food from other parts of the world to get into our local markets are no longer needed. And that's the power of the human being that's being missed, is the ability to change the world around us through the way we spend our money, by making conscious decisions for the health of our own bodies and our families.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's just a recognition, and it's not about blame. It's not about blame saying, well, I'm a bad person because I did all this stuff to myself. I unknowingly lived a toxic lifestyle. And it wasn't until I met people who had a better way through better food choices and had energy that I admired and went, well, I want that. How come I don't have that? And knowing something's not right in my own life, being willing to question and challenge that, and then make the steps towards a better lifestyle, that I started to see, well, I can actually have what those people have. I lost 30 kilos in my own weight because I chose to eat healthier. Yes, there will be some impact of that as through the situation I was going with my health, but that was a conscious decision. And it wasn't all my health, because I know the doctors are worried about me losing a lot of weight. When I got that 30 kilos off, when I got to the 87.5 kilos, which was my target weight, I held it.
Yeah.
Even though I'm still exhibiting the same symptoms. It was a conscious choice through my food selection.
So, what I'm thinking about is what would it take for the great majority um, to accept what you're saying, and to actually make changes in the way that they purchase and consume food. And what I keep going back to, which is essentially my own story, is that that what it took for me was to actually be able to afford to eat healthier. I could theoretically hear those arguments or hear what you're saying and say, okay, yeah, I agree, but I don't have the money to eat well. So, and it wasn't until I was in a position financially to eat fresh food and take supplements that I was really able to uh, take the necessary action to change my health around. And I wonder how much that is, like, I wonder if that's the most prohibitive reason that more people don't embrace a healthy lifestyle, because they can't afford it. Because when you only have, X amount of money every month, and you know that it would mean eating half as much as you eat right now if you were to choose to eat healthy, half or less than half, that's a pretty hard sell on a lot of people, especially if you can go, buy a fast food meal for $3 or whatever, or buy your groceries at the dollar store. It's a hard sell to get people on board. And I just wonder if it's even possible for the great majority to change their food consumption behaviors, as long as there's that sort of financial inequality.
That's a huge topic.
It is, because
huge.
It now takes the whole idea of food, and it branches into all of these other issues in society that are keeping people, for the most part, it's limiting the choices that people have.
I don't disagree. And statistically, I think if we look at the numbers of health issues, it's generally the lower socioeconomic groups that have the greatest health issues. And I can only use a few simplistic answers at the moment because it's a big topic, but you don't know how important your health is until you don't have it. Yeah. And in order to make a massive shift focus-wise, the way human beings seem to choose these days is that we have to face a crisis. And in my own life, it wasn't until I faced my second crisis that I actually went, oh, it's me. There's something else I need to be doing. So what am I focusing on? So my focus became full on health, and what was it? And that was just starting one step at a time to understand what it is to live a healthy life and eat properly. When I look at our ancestors that would have come before us, the system we have created in this world at the moment has become very reliant on other people's to provide expertise and advice and everything. Now in Canada, you guys have got a hard situation because half the year you can't grow anything. So you can't grow your fresh fruit and veggies out in the backyard very easily. And even in the summertime, you can get an unexpected snow dump. But we used to preserve foods. We used to grow our own foods. We used to have our own garden beds, and we used to have community markets. Now we go to the supermarket and just buy what's on the shelf, which is generally shipped from somewhere else in the back of a truck and in a box or a carton, in a plastic container, and put on a shelf. And I walk into a shop now, a supermarket, and walk around the inside of the aisles and go, it's just not food. You turn around, look at the ingredients. You're not eating food, you're eating something else, something developed in a lab to taste like something else. What I found was that when I was faced with the health issue, my resources focused on that. So my money, I don't spend very much money, but when it comes to food, I'll eat the best I can afford. And that's all you can do. Your body can adapt. We put these barriers up that we can't do things, but you look at how many people live in an area now where you can't have a garden bed out the back of your house or your apartment or your block of flats. But you can grow microgreens in your own kitchen if you got the ability to. In New Zealand, we're very lucky because we have a very fertile land and our seasons are very good and conducive to growing food most of the year. So, it's very easy for me to say, grow your own vegetables, but that's time consuming. But it's interesting how we don't have time these days because we are working 50, 60 hours a week. We are getting kids off to all different sorts of sports events that you have to have. And there's all these outside expectations that you've got to watch these movies. You've got to have certain expectations of what your life must look like. But I tell you what, my life, I started to discover it when I started to realize that my health's the key thing in it. Because I started to realize what no longer serves me. So I could go through my own apartment, which you've been sharing me, you've been doing, and look at the things that are in my life that are no benefit. A jacket that I've held onto for 15, 20 years, I've worn once. What am I doing? Somebody else could be using that. Why am I attached to that? Is there some emotional attachment or something I want from that jacket that makes me feel good? Whatever that is. And I realized that my time was taken up with distractions. I haven't watched TV for nearly a year and a half. I watch the movie every now and then, but since I've been in the States, been on lockdown, I've watched a lot more TV, and I just realized how much time I've wasted. Now, over here, I'll use an excuse with my treatment. I haven't felt like doing much when I get home. I don't want to be concentrating on very much because my ability to concentrate for a long period of time is just not there. But my choice was to focus on my health. So then I all of a sudden had time to do sprouting, to learn about sprouting, and not do it all at once. Just learn one thing this week, another thing the next week. So in answer to your question, what it takes is a crisis, a health crisis, for us to realize what's really important. And then for us to make conscious decisions about what are we doing to support our health. Now, I know a lot of people don't have money. That becomes a question of what sort of societal system do we want to live in? What sort of societal system do we want to live in where we have food pyramids that come out that show us that grains and wheat and stuff are the biggest part of our food diet that we should have, when those were developed by the grain industries back in the 50s and 60s? What information are we putting into our mind when you think about our ancestors would never have had a whole lot of grains to choose from? You had green leafy vegetables and meat. What else did you have? So I do believe that we've stepped so far away from a natural existence. It's not about changing the way we live too much, but a natural food supply, that we've forgotten it. Most of our decisions in this world, I'm making some generalized statements here, but the really healthy people I've met don't watch TV and create their own food somehow. They trade with other people, whatever, some means of getting good quality food. They don't have to have a lot of money. But most of us have been conditioned to buy food based on what's on TV, and when we go into a supermarket, what's got the nicest packaging. Now, people can call me, that's not rational, but I know that's rational because marketing companies would not be promoting this colors, the type of packaging on food products if they didn't know it worked.
Yeah.
They know this stuff works. Most people out there that I've talked to, which is interesting, especially from lower socioeconomic groups, because they don't have the education that or exposure that I had, don't know that when you go into a supermarket, all the candy and stuff's right beside the cash register in the till, so that your kid comes up and says, oh, mummy, I want that. Or you're standing there going, oh, here's an impulse purchase. You're doing it because they know the conditioning of the brain. They're not doing it because they're trying to make you healthy. That's a big leap, but that's my interpretation of it. They're trying to do it to put money in their pocket for the products they've got. That's not about your health. You have to become aware of the food you're putting into your body. And that is where you make the choice. So yeah, I get it. If you haven't got the money, it's tough, but you figure out a way, and it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, one thing really does kind of lead into the next, and because it's like you really can't even entertain this idea of food consumption based on economic status without questioning a lot of things that rely on a class system, uh, and then it becomes just this never-ending sort of rabbit hole for sure. Um,
If just on that though, Mark, and this is difficult. This was difficult for me to see when I was going through it. If I can't see a way forward or find a way forward from my own situation, the world's never going to change, and therefore I can't change. There has to be a desire for you to want to make that improvement in your life somehow. And I get it if you haven't got any money, but I know people in New Zealand. New Zealand, we're very fortunate. It's a perfect climate. But I know people who've got no money and they eat healthier than you or I do because they grow their own vegetables.
yeah. What kind of encouragement would you would you offer to people who want to make changes in their life but feel helpless to make those changes?
Find out why they feel helpless.
Hmm.
A lot of it for me, because I've been in that situation, I didn't know what I was about. I didn't know what health was. So I just started doing something, anything that was going to open me up to understanding a better way of living. One of the things I did I only got this by, a lot of the stuff I came across by chance. I met a nutritionist that said, here's a program you can follow. And I did, and it worked. So I stuck at it, and it was easy. So I stuck at it. My sister went off to the Kaha Institute in New Zealand, which talks about permaculture and heritage seeds and nutrient-dense foods. And my sister came back and just started talking about that. And I listened to her and went, that sounds pretty cool. And that information is based on a philosophy called by Weston A. Price, who was a dentist in the 1920s, who went around the world investigating why in the developed world they were starting to get dentistry issues with jaws and teeth and decay, and yet when you go to indigenous races around the world, they didn't. They had very strong bone structures, square jaws, and minimal side effects or health issues. So he researched that, and he attributed it to their diets. They ate a lot of plants and vegetables, but they also had a lot of animal proteins. And it's not the big juicy steaks that we see in this world as being the best thing for you. It was the bone broth, the kidneys, the livers, the pates that you'd make out of those things, because that's where the minerals are. Now, we don't eat that stuff these days because we only eat the steak because that's the best part. But it's the most least nutrient dense part of the animal. So I just started there's a podcast that makes it really easy to listen to. So I started listening to that, and I listened to that and go, that's common sense. I can do that. And then I bought a book. When I had some money, I bought a book. Even when I didn't have any money, if I felt I needed it, I'd go and buy that book because I need to make that change. So I listened to what was around me, and I was lucky. A lot of people around me are on this health journey as well. So I got able to pick up pieces of information because that's how I learn. I'm not the best researcher, go out and read a book and all of a sudden implement it. I need to see people doing it and then pick up glimpses of information, little bits of information from people around me, and then put that into my own life that works for me. Not how a book says it, but how it works for me. So it's not impossible. Just find out, if you can, emotionally, what it is that makes you feel helpless and get past that, because I guarantee it's an illusion. It's an illusion that we're helpless. And most of us, especially in the lower socioeconomic ranks, and I've been there, I was there as a child and I came out of it with my career and I went back there when I got injured. I've been to the lower socioeconomic groups. It's a choice. And I may sound hard saying that, but I wish somebody had just shaken me up and said, it's a choice. You obviously don't care about yourself if you don't believe you're worth having good nutrients inside your body. And that was my issue. Lack of self-belief and enough love of myself that I would make this happen.
Yeah, earlier you mentioned, that it usually takes crisis to prompt us to make, to realize we need to make these sort of health changes in our life. And it becomes really easy for me to see, like, over the last 7 years, that I've made, there's maybe like three really significant times in the last 7 years where I've made extreme changes to for my health, and each one of those came on the heels of a health crisis. Which is very humbling, because now, at this moment in time, there's not a health crisis in my life, but I hear this voice asking me, "Are you still willing to make changes?" If and I think maybe that is the mark of actual maturity, is being able to make a choice absent of a crisis, to be able to make a paradigm changing choice absent of a crisis. I think if we can reach that stage, then we really know we are, living our greatest lives, because because we're not holding on to the familiar. I think that has a lot to do with our reluctance to make changes in life, positive changes, with regards to health or anything else, is that we are attracted to the familiar. And, you know, as you had mentioned about, you know, looking across our possessions, and, you know, I just recently did a spring cleaning and liquidated a ton of stuff. And so much of the things that I was attached to, like, you know, like your example of the jacket, you know, it was a kind of comfort and familiarity with the possession that was like a channel into something from my past that I wasn't ready to let go of yet. You know, oh, this backpack is associated with the memory of when I was traveling to wherever. And I don't know that I want to let go of that, because there's some part of my identity that is still rooted in that experience. And when you think about it and when you phrase it like that, it almost sounds ludicrous that we would attach some form of our present identity with an object, because it's like, oh, if I look at that object, I'll remember that experience. And so I think sometimes when it comes to letting go of things, is that we're afraid that we're going to let go of a part of ourselves and not remember it again. Because, I mean, there's certainly possessions I have that I'll look at it and I'll be like, oh, that was from, you know, whatever event that happened 15 or 20 years ago. And what crosses my mind at that moment is, wow, if it wasn't for that object, I would probably forget about that experience. And so you know, that whole question of how nostalgia keeps us from growing into who we could become because we're afraid to let go of who we were. I think that's a huge kind of existential thing that applies to a lot of things, like being healthy. Because my first, you know, health crisis 7 years ago, and, you know, it turned into me quitting smoking, having been a lifelong smoker, you know, but I did. And it's, you know, it's been 7 years since I quit smoking. And I wonder how much of my attachment to smoking was purely because it locked me into a mindset and a perception of what my identity was. And it was harder to let go of that than it was to let go of the actual action of smoking, which wasn't, at that point, wasn't even rewarding to me in and of itself. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm on a tangent, but that's like that. I feel like that could be some kind of thesis or something, is our reluctance to let go is so much grounded in our identity. And when you relate that to food, you know, if you've had pizza every Friday night for the last 10 years, then you're going to be reluctant to give that up because some part of your identity is locked into how you're eating. Are you a Coke or a Pepsi person? Are you a Taco Bell or a Dairy Queen person? When we identify ourselves with these brands, then they kind of override the health concerns associated with those brands, which is, yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of a bit of its own rabbit hole, but it's, I can see in relating it to this situation, you know, that it's relevant because for me, my whole changing the way that I ate also hinged on a crisis. And I look back and I'm like, why did it take me so long to figure out or to just accept? I mean, even past that financial barrier, it still took me a few years. Once I could eat much healthier, it still took me a couple years before I really embraced that. And it took a crisis to really get me to fully absorb that information and apply it.
It's all perceptions and meanings that we attach to things. What you just said, it makes a lot of sense. It's all the belief systems we hold. I used to, when I'd go out to have dinner somewhere, I'd always buy a meat dish, because if I bought just a salad, I always feel like I was getting ripped off.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Me too.
And so now when I go to a place, I'm looking, where's the best salad I can get? And maybe I'll get a piece of protein with it. It's completely different, but it was a mindset. And it's a mindset that, and I've had people challenge me about whether I should still be eating meat or not, because the stats show that red meat's a contributor to colon cancer. But I've now been through the phase of being a vegetarian and trying to go vegan. It doesn't work for me. My body can't do that. But I had to discover that for myself, but I needed a framework to start. But what I found also was that I didn't trust myself enough to believe that I was going to be able to cope with any new situation that arose. That was an unconscious belief that I had. If I make a change, is it going to change everything in my life? Well, I needed it to change everything in my life, because my life wasn't working. And most of us, I would say, yeah, it's a pretty bold statement, but most of us, our lives aren't working. We're not happy. We're just getting by. We have a lot of stresses in our lives that we can't deal with. The economy shuts down for two months worldwide, and we're panicking about staying at home and dealing with a whole lot of emotional issues. Well, what are we distracting ourselves with by our jobs and by our expectations of what life must look like? And whose life are you trying to live? I'm always amazed when I see a soft drink commercial come on TV, and the people that drink a certain brand are the cool people, because they got the fancy bodies, they got the beautiful bodies. That's not a sign of health. That's not a sign of coolness. That's some cool music and some interesting colors being put together in a way that makes you think that's what I should be doing. Because you wear a certain pair of jeans with the right tag on it, that doesn't make you any better. But we all aspire to be something that we're. This whole system is about trying to be something better than we think we are, when we don't realize that the beauty is actually what's sitting inside of our hearts, inside of our bodies. If you're the healthiest you can be because you're eating good one, but emotionally satisfied in who you are and love yourself, none of that stuff matters. Don't get me wrong, I'd love some fancy toys. I've got nothing. After I finish this treatment, I got nothing left. Like, there's nothing. The well's dry. And I may have a bit of debt because of the situation.
Sure.
And I sit there and I think about that and go, well, what does that mean for me? It doesn't mean anything. I've got my life and my health. I can go and do whatever I want.
Yeah.
I can go and get a job part-time. It doesn't have to be this one that's going to put me in a fancy suit and drive me around in a fancy car for me to be happy. Why? Because I'm happy with who I am. Because I love who I am. But man, it took me 44 years to get to that point, because of the conditioning that was coming to me from outside, that I attached meaning to. This means that. I'm going to be cool if I've got the right watch. I'm going to be cool if I've got the fanciest car. It's bollocks. The human being is cool because of the love they have inside their heart and the genuine compassion they have for other people. That's what we've lost. This coronavirus is a perfect opportunity for us to find a better way of living. But we'll see if humanity wants to do that. We're so convinced and conditioned that there's only one way to do things. And that's what I want to espouse to the world and share with people. There's options all around us. It's a belief system that we hold from generations of being told this is the way life is. And that we must accept what is given to us. Not anymore. Not anymore.
You know, I like that. I mean, I wish people would talk a little bit more about how this COVID situation has the potential to transform humanity and society for the better. You know, it seems that everybody's so locked into, their favorite dystopian version of the future, that they're not talking about how in the long run, you know, as a society and as a species, that we could actually push through and find ourselves in a kind of utopia. You know, I mean, it's like the Star Wars versus Star Trek kind of a future scenario. And right now, everybody seems a lot more intent on visualizing and discussing a Star Wars type of dysfunctional society than they do at saying, okay, like, how is it possible to actually learn from this situation? And what are the things that on a mass scale that society, you know, needs to leave behind, like the 20-year-old jacket? You know, what are things that as a society we can shed and start thinking in new ways about sustainable energy and sustainable food supply? And I'm excited for those conversations to start happening. I don't know to what extent those conversations are happening yet, because I've heard so little positive talk so far.
Yeah.
Uh, and it seems that there's a lot of division, and either side of the division line doesn't want to have a conversation yet with the other side, which could potentially lead to transformation. It still seems like right now people are very much, this is what I think, and I'm not even going to listen to what you're saying if you don't absolutely agree that I'm 100% right in everything. And that to me is, I mean, that's totally dysfunctional. But I think once we pass that point and actually start having conversations, that potentially, you know, it could be very exciting for humanity to move forward. But again, going back to this whole idea of, you know, it takes a crisis for people to be willing to think outside of the box that they've contained themselves in. It makes me wonder if what we've experienced so far is just the tip of the iceberg, because I don't yet see people willing to look outside of their box.
I agree. Yeah, sorry.
You know, I mean, we're not necessarily in a crisis yet. We're inconvenienced, but based on the fact that people are not yet willing to have a conversation with, like, the other side, whatever the other side is, tells me that we're not in a crisis yet, because crisis tends to break down that wall that separates you and me.
Good point.
So
I agree. I guess just to build on that a little bit, with my own journey, I've gone against conventional belief systems in terms of finding my own health. And I found evidence for my own health improving from following what was right for me. And what you said about the two opposing points of view not coming together to find the transformation to move forward. People will say what I've done, and they could do. I haven't had any comments like this so far, is not the appropriate way I should have gone. But it's not based. Doctors have looked at me like, well, what are you doing? That's not the right way to do it. We've got the answer, but nobody else has. But my evidence in my own life has shown me there's always options if you can let go of what you think you know. And I thought when you get cancer, you die. That's not the case. It can mean that.
yeah.
I also thought that when you get diagnosed with cancer, you don't have much time, because that's the impression you get. Well, I'm now going, since my diagnosis, which was October 2018, I'm still going, and I'm still walking around having a good life, because my emotional state's changed and my physiology is changing. So the evidence that I can relay to people has said this is what's happening in my own life from doing these things. I don't have billions of dollars to do double-blind studies to convince other people that this is the right way. I also know that Indigenous people around the world have remedies that only require plants to be used as medicine. Simple concoctions that can help your body get out of a crisis situation. But once again, that's denied because they don't have billions of dollars to do double-blind studies. But they do have a genetic history of this stuff working for them. And where do a lot of these synthetics and pharmaceuticals come from? They come from nature. They're taken from plants, synthesized, patented, and then sold to us from a plant that's free to the world.
Mhm.
Why are we doing this? Why do we think that we have to pay for everything? Why do we think that there's only one way of doing health in this world and it requires billions and billions of dollars? Mine's been relatively cheap. This, don't get me wrong, my treatment that I'm receiving at the moment, it's the Rolls Royce. Like I've gone from riding on a scooter to a Rolls Royce. I get it. It's a lot of money, and what's been able to unfold in front of me is not available to everybody. But what I've been trying to understand is, in my own situation with no money, how can I get health? And all I started doing was figuring this out by doing emotional release, by listening to podcasts, and by choosing better food options. I started to make an improvement. No different. You don't have to go and buy organic food. You buy the best that you can in that situation. So that means instead of buying a McDonald's hamburger, it's tough over here in America because fast food's cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the supermarket and buy that lettuce. Go to the supermarket, buy those green vegetables. That's the choice. And then if you can get, and you'll start to say, well, I need a bit more money. Maybe you can go and find another job that helps you to get a bit more money to be able to buy better food. Or you might want to get trained up a bit better because your body's starting to function better because you've got more nutrients going, and it then gives you the option to go and do the next step, which is to find a better job or get a qualification. And I don't believe that's the only way, but that's an option. Once you start to do that, the next step falls in front of you. If you're trying to figure out how to get from where you are right now to the end goal, you're not going to do it. It's too big a goal. Just the next step. The next step is I want to eat more green vegetables. Okay, I do that. A couple of weeks, a month later, you'll start to have more ideas coming into you, and you'll make another little change. It's not this radical change that's in front of us. It's just building on what you can when you can.
Yeah.
And I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to do anything when I got diagnosed. I just took one step at a time because it's too much to take on. There's no way you can do it all in one hit. But I made the changes, and the changes are working. So it's never impossible. But,
That's
oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No,
It,
go ahead. Go ahead,
uh,
please.
this belief system that you have to have somebody else how to tell you how to be healthy is a fallacy. And that it's because we know what we're meant to be doing. It's just, why don't we do that?
Yeah, that's such a great point that you made. That it doesn't help, or it doesn't happen all at once, and things build on each other. And again, just looking at my own sort of journey, it was very much, again, like spread out over this 7-year period of saying, if I'm still smoking, then increasing my vegetables, you kind of got to start somewhere, right? And I chose with the stopping smoking first and getting those kind of toxins out of my body, and then into different supplements. And it took me years to figure out like what were the supplements that I actually worked for me. And then, getting involved with a naturopath and some natural medicine practitioners, going through that process of really discovering what is it that I can do as an individual to meet the needs of my body to remain in an ideal state of operation. And, you kind of touched on it as well, is that you have to figure out what's right with you as an individual, because even the people that have the best intentions that are trying to encourage you to follow a specific regimen that's worked for them, that might not work for you because your body is different. Yeah. And so it's not as easy as like reading a book about this or that to suddenly adopt their philosophy and apply it to you and expect that it's not realistic to expect that the same things that happen to them will happen to you. It therefore is on the individual to really go through a process, because it is a process of finding the right balance for you as far as nutrition and hydration and getting enough sleep. I mean, there's so many, like, those are key factors into, you know, what creates an optimal state for people. And if they're not doing the work that like saying, well, what is the difference between, you know, drinking water all day and drinking coffee? I mean, if they're not, you know, it's like we're our best petri dish. We can actually look and say, how is it affecting me if I eat this versus eating that? You know, and you spend a day or a week doing something, and then you can compare it to the week before. And I mean, people really, it's up to people to take the initiative to find out what's going to work for them.
The most important thing in my health journey is me.
Yeah.
Because I have to make the decisions, nobody else. They can make decisions for you, but you're at the mercy of what they want you to do. If I have to make the decisions about where I want to go. Just to touch on something else, if I can. The other thing that we think, and I've had to let go of my own perceptions of how I see the world and what I thought I knew. You've got to have contrast in your own mind to be able to see another way forward. And what I mean by that is, you have I mean, I'm well educated. I've had a very fortunate life and been through a university, got a good education, had a good career. But I realized through this how regimented my thought process was. I had to break that down. So I started listening and watching and reading things that were outside my comfort zone to see how much there was out there, just to start to break down that mindset that's in my head. And what I found was that I need contrast to be healthy. I need multiple perspectives to be able to find the ground that works for me. Now, what does that mean? You need your allopathic doctors. You need your natural doctors to be able to find a solution for humanity and primarily for yourself. Keep it self-interested for a start. Where do I need to focus on? What is it that I can do that's going to work into my life? And as you said, that's a spectrum. What works for me is not going to work for you. But you've got to find where you are on that spectrum and start following that path. So you've got to start having a different perspective in your head and not having all the answers in your head, because you won't get anywhere, because you're just repeating what you've done in the past. 2 books I'd like to recommend. One is Dr. Buttar's book, The 9 Steps to Keeping the Doctor Away. And that's a really good book because it talks about toxins in your environment and your mindset and that sort of stuff, and nutrition. And then the other one is Radical Remissions by Dr. Kelly Turner. And she talks about the research she's done in the cancer research of people who have made radical remissions. The reason why I suggest those books, even if, irrespective if you've got a chronic disease or not, but if you've got a chronic situation in your life, a chronic health issue, there's a framework to give you an overview of what it is to take control of your life and be healthy and find new perspectives.
Oh, wow.
It goes through the emotional stuff. It goes through the nutritional stuff. It goes through the spiritual stuff. It goes through what people did to make massive turnarounds in their own life. It's possible, but I guarantee those books will not be on most medical professionals' reading list because it's already predefined, that medical arena. Now, I'm not bagging the medical profession. I can bag any profession out there: accountants, lawyers, real estate agents, car dealers. Everybody has their weaknesses. But what I'm saying is that we're at a point in time in my own life and for the whole life on this planet, we have to find better ways forward, because this way we're doing it is not going to work. We can't keep shutting down every time we get a virus which our body's already got lots of viruses in them. The mindset we have around this fear issue going on at the moment is incredible. Now, I'm not saying what governments have done is wrong, because I don't have that knowledge. But any organism, if it's starved of its inputs, it won't thrive. And at the end of the day, the planet is a big organism.
Yeah. Wow. Well, um, do you have any kind of final?
We're a long way from where we started, Mark.
We are, but like every week, a theme seems to naturally present itself during these conversations, and it definitely has for me this week. And I'll leave it up to the viewers to extract that for themselves. But for me, it definitely has, and I feel like uh, that sort of theme has become clear to me and has given me a bit of motivation, um, which is great, and I appreciate that, Durrick. Um, so yeah, I mean, with that, do you have any kind of final words for the week for people?
Sure. Be happy. That's the one ingredient. You don't know when life's up. Be happy. Don't be scared to go out and try different things and get a new perspective and listen to counter arguments to what you believe. Let people in, let people share. Be happy and be responsible for yourself. Nobody else can make the best decisions for you, because at the end of the day, their interests in you aren't as high as your own interests in yourself. So please just go and be happy and figure out what that means to you.
Well said. Great. Well, I look forward to hearing from you on Saturday next week, and as you'll be right about to start your new week of
Next round.
So have a great week. Give my best to your brother.
Will do. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for your time, and thanks for the discussion today. It's gone somewhere I didn't quite expect, but I always trust that the stuff that needs to come out does.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Mark. See you later. Bye.